Hey everybody, good to see you back once again. Let's put that Farmall H carburetor back together. No further introduction needed. To catch you all up from where we left off last time, everything has been cleaned and prepped. As you can see, I sandblasted the housings. I also did the inside of the fuel bowl to make sure that was good and clean. And then I made sure all of the passages and everything were completely open, unobstructed, good pass-throughs everywhere. And a lot of people just want to soak a carburetor body in some carburetor clean solution, pull it out, blast some compressed air through it, and call it good. That's just a good first step that I do quite often myself. But after that, I do like to physically run items through these passages. All right. Sometimes a drill bit of matching size is very good just to run through by hand. You know, it's completely clean. Other times for super small passages, very small gauge wire. You can bump up to larger gauge wire if it will fit. Another good thing is a pipe cleaner. Okay, you can put this in the carburetor solution, run that through all the passages, blow it out with some air, give it a good flush. That works very well. Once you're satisfied that everything is completely open, the next thing I do is I verify that all my gasket surfaces are flat. This is especially critical between the bowl and the upper body because the gasket that seals them is not very thick. And ears like this one can become deformed and creep down if someone has over tightened the housing screws. So what you do is you get a completely flat surface, throw some sandpaper on it, and then with even pressure, just start doing like a figure eight, all right? And your high spots will show up immediately. They will be the ones that start turning shiny right away. Keep going until it's shiny all the way around. I even did the mounting flange too. So the way we have everything laid out right here, pretty much the only components from the old setup that are going to be used is the housings. And right here, we got the float bowl, the stand, and we've got the Venturi. The rest of this was the master kit. So it gave us new shafts, new flapper plates, new jets, new springs, new balls, new seals, new everything. So that's what we've got arranged over here. And the pieces in the middle are, again, pieces that were included brand new in the kit, but I chose to sandblast the shiny silver coating off of them on all the parts that will be external because I have not had good luck getting paint to stick to shiny pieces like that. So we got like the choke shaft, main jet, some of the plugs, some springs, the bowl screws. That's what I chose to blast so that the paint will stick to those very well. And I don't know why, but I can't help but save anything from the carburetor rebuilds that I think could be repurposed again. That's what we've got here. I've got boxes and bags of that stuff squirreled away for different style carburetors everywhere around here. I should probably start purging some of that eventually, but enough talking. Let's get going. Okay, we will start with the lower housing first, and we'll kind of go in reverse order of disassembly, but a good easy place to start is the drain at the bottom where the excess fuel can run out. So we have the new felt slug that will go in there. Get it seated down in all the way. All right. And then we have a new plug with a drain hole in it that goes in the bottom. And once again, these are just a Welch plug. So you can see they're convex on the top, concave on the bottom. And the way they work is, well, you throw them in with the convex side up, and this one has to go in just perfectly square. It's a very good fit. All right. Okay, round two. To edit that out or not, I don't know. I will actually hold it down with a screwdriver this time. Okay, now return to being smooth. So the theory, or I should say the way these work is they're basically arched up in the center to start with. And what you want to do is put a punch on the top part of them, and a few hits will push them down. And when that happens, the outer edges will will expand out. And that's what seals it around the perimeter. And that's why when we took the old one out, we just took a punch and hammered it down even further, because what that does is it reverses that convex, turns it concave, and that actually draws the outer portion away from the body, loosens it up, and you can take it back out. Most times they'll fall right out when they get to that point. So a nice flat faced punch. One hit is all it takes. We're good. Next up, we will do the main jet because it's right next door. And as I said before, this is where I decided to retain the original graphite packing. So the new rebuild kit provides us with this rubber slug, and it has a little bit of a taper on the one end. And this would be like the packing nut, okay? And it has a corresponding taper inset into the end of it, and your main jet portion would go through, and as you turn the packing nut down, it would cinch this rubber all around and seal it. I still have more faith in the original graphite rope style packing than I do this rubber slug. Nothing wrong with this, but I believe that is still going to hold up better to our modern fuels. So I will retain this slug. I will also substitute the packing nut for the old one, because the old one has a much more pronounced taper. You'll get a better cinch on that graphite, and the graphite's already formed according to that anyhow. So I'll swap those two pieces out, and we don't need any kind of sealer on these threads because the packing material on the inside does that job already. And I don't want to tighten that down until I put the new main jet in. Okay, main jet has just bottomed out. So I cinch the packing nut just until we can feel some resistance. And yes, definite drag on that main jet. That's what we want. Next, we'll do the idling jet. We got a new one in the kit. Center hole is open. Screwdriver slot on top, threads on the bottom. Goes in that hole right there. Can be very fun to establish the threads if you don't have a screw starter. We'll see if we can get by without one. Just a small cinch to hold it in. Looks good. Idle air adjusting needle now. And we find the larger of the two springs for that. All right, that's the one we want right there. That just threads in the back. And just very gingerly run it in until it stops. Right there. Discharge nozzle goes in now, and again we've got a new one in the kit, so all those tiny little holes, all good, all open. We've got a gasket in place under the hex portion, goes in up on top, and there's the threaded end. So here is also included in the kit a new brass nut. Again, a gasket goes under that. Just holding it with my finger on the other end for now. Once again, 5/16 hex on this side. Small cinch. Good to go. The bowl drain is up next. Two pieces, the drain itself and a housing for it. All right, I do put some thread sealer on the pipe threads on the end of the housing. You don't want to have a fuel seep here. I've found that makes it seal a lot more reliably. And once that is home, the actual drain itself runs in. A little bit of a cinch to seat it, and we move on. All right, and to finish up the lower portion of the carburetor, I'm putting some of my favorite long-lasting grease onto the pivot portions of the choke shaft. You probably don't need to, I do it anyhow. So we've got the choke shaft will go in, the butterfly plate, and then we have the detent, the ball, and the seal retainer. So first thing we're going to do, and I'll show you this little trick. It took me way too long to learn, but we can put this felt ring seal down into the hole right there and then tap the retainer down over the top of it. But that retainer is going to scrunch that seal a little bit when it goes in there, and then you're having to force the choke shaft down through, and you've got these square edges that can gouge out of it. Show you what I like to do. So we'll start with throwing the retainer onto the choke shaft, and then we do the new felt seal. All right, make that all happy, and then it all goes in at once. And now we can use the backside of that choke lever as a driver for the retainer. And it doesn't take much to tap it in. Just like that. So now everything is in place. We have a good tight seal on that choke shaft, and we didn't have to damage any of the felt ring by trying to force that on through. And this is my favorite part, because invariably there's going to be 2 to 3 people that just cannot will themselves to wait until the end of the episode before they start firing that keyboard up in the comment section. You forgot the detent. Nope. You just turn that to the side. The spring can go in the pocket, and the little detent ball perches on top of the spring. And as we pivot that choke lever back, we will depress that ball and click just like that. Gotcha. Choke plate can go in now, and once again we've got that little arrow pointing up because it's not a perfect circle, it's rather oval shaped, so that it can go in here and seal the passage completely. And this is where one of Senior's screw starters come in very, very handy, because they grab onto the end of that screw and they allow you to start it without it falling off. And with both of the screws tight, we check the operation of the plate. Very good. Nice positive click to hold it open. So the detent is working just fine. All right, we're done with the bottom portion. All right, still hanging in there? Good. Upper portion now. So we will begin with the throttle stop screw, and that has a new spring that goes around it. Acts as a like a friction stop. Throttle shaft goes in now. Once again, I lubricated the pivot areas with a long-lasting grease. And you want to position the quadrant here between the stop up here and the end of the screw down there. So that's its sweep like that. Throttle plate goes in now. Boy, that is a really shiny one. Look at the reflection. I almost hate to put it in. We'll put it in anyway. Start it through the slot that's in the center of the shaft. And when it's all centered up, you should be able to close it. Yep, and we can see the screw holes are lined up. So once again, our handy dandy screw starter. There we are. Start them in just until they start to grab. These are invaluable tools for grabbing onto these hard to start small thread screws. It's like a positive lock screwdriver is what it is. And once again, you can stake these on the back side if you want. Being an updraft carburetor, if they walked out, the only place they can go is down into the bolt. So I choose to leave them. If you do stake these over, basically you're just mashing the ends of the screws. And I've had pretty good luck by taking a needle nose vice grips. Pretend this is a needle nose vice grip, all right? Go in there and just clamp it from the head of the screw, just kind of off the edge of it. And once you clamp it, let it go click. And, basically you're just mashing the leading screw thread over so that if this does loosen up and start backing out, it can't just continue to go and fall out. You don't want to deform them to the point where they become difficult to remove the next time. I have battled with a few that they really raised heck with them, and you just about had to destroy everything to get it back apart. But good action there, nice and smooth. Everything's tight. We move on. Now we can throw the inlet needle seat in place. You can see this has another small gasket under it. Doesn't have to be very tight. Tight enough to make that gasket seal. Up next, the legs, if you will, or the bracket for the float. Two very small screws. You can see I've preloaded them into the bracket. They thread right into the carburetor body, and these are too small and it's too tight of a space to even use the screw starters. So I think I'll just hold them in position with the bracket, and then there we are. Just start them one at a time. Got one, and there's the other. Inlet needle drops in, and we can position the float over the top of it. We have a new pivot pin that was included in the carburetor kit. And again, that pin just floats in there. All right, we need to measure the float height next, but for the non-carburetor people, I'll walk you through the purpose of the float and the inlet needle. It's pretty simple. So as gasoline is running into the carburetor, it fills the float bowl, which is this cavity right here, and the float does just that. It floats. So as the fuel level rises, the float will also rise along with it. The float arm then pivots against the inlet needle as the float rises, and once the fuel level in the bowl reaches the appropriate level, that arm will have the inlet needle firmly against the seat, and that blocks the incoming supply of fuel so that it doesn't just keep building up in the carburetor, overtops the float bowl, runs out the vent, and out this end of the carburetor in a very uncontrolled manner. But for this to work properly, the float has to be calibrated to a certain position. So to do that, you tip the carburetor upside down and you put the gasket on top of the flange. All right, try not to push on the float. Now, there is an official measurement from the top of the gasket to the uppermost part of the float. You want to be 1 inch and 27/32. So we will check it with our 30-second scale, and we are at 1 and 28/32, which is good enough because they allow you a 3/64 plus or minus margin of error. So we are well within that. Now, if the float did not line up to that measurement, you have to bend the float arm. But if you do that, do not bend it on top of the inlet needle. You don't want to damage the tip, all right? Otherwise, you need to get a new one. So you pull the pin out, take the float off, and you do not bend it out at the hinge. You grab it with one pair of pliers at the hinge, and you bend the float arm near the float body itself. Put it back in, redo your measurement. Once you hit that spec, you're good to put the carburetor halves back together. So with our gasket in place, the Venturi can go back in, just a slip fit, has to go in on top of the gasket, and then we can carefully put the lower half of the carburetor body down over the float. Just be sure not to hang the float and bend that arm. Just like that. We can throw the screws in now. New ones came with the kit. Once again, these don't have to be Gorilla tight because that just distorts the flanges if you go too far. We can hear our float opening and closing, so that's good. Just about done now. We can replace the drilling plug up here. I put just a dab of thread sealant on this one. Again, you probably don't need to. This one isn't as critical, but we might as well have it sealed up very well. And finally, the last piece, we've got a new fuel line inlet fitting, and we've got this protective cardboard sleeve that comes on it because it has a new screen on it. All right, nice pre-filter screen. Gasket goes just under the fitting, and we just thread it in. Just a cinch tight, and we're finished. We've got everything reassembled on the carburetor. Okay. Good choke plate action. Good throttle plate action. Looks good. Now the initial settings, I'm returning all three of mine to what they were prior, because that tells me, in theory, that engine should be pretty close to dialed in. But we'll go through them anyway. So the book spec for the idle stop is actually 1.5 turns open. Mine was only about 1/2 of a turn open. So that's what we're going to do with that. The idle needle. Book spec is to do 1 turn off of the seat. Mine was only about 1/3 of a turn. Okay. And the main jet on the bottom, they want you to start it 3 turns out. I was only 1 1/4 turns. There's half. There's 1 1/4. And we're done. So this concludes Farmall H carburetor reassembly. I hope you all found this episode entertaining. I hope you found it helpful. And I hope to see you all back again next time.